Okay. So welcome everyone. My name is Daniela Duran. I'm the Director of Education with Nano at Stanford, and I help manage the intern program. So I'm here to give you an overview. We have some special guests, interns as well as staff members, and we are recording this so that we can share it with others that were unable to make it. So let's go ahead and get started with a land acknowledgement.
Stanford sits on the ancestral lands of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe.
This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Ohlone people.
Consistent with our values of community and inclusion,
we have a responsibility to acknowledge, honor, and make visible
the university's relationship to Native peoples.
Right. So our agenda for today is a 10-minute intro from myself about nanotechnology and about our facility, followed by a day in the life of from our interns and a virtual tour of the clean room facilities. And then we'll have 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. You're welcome to put in things in the chat as we're working through, but I would ask you to stay muted until the end for the Q&A. Okay, great. All right, so first off, what is Nano at Stanford? Because here's the emblem, it's on my shirt, it's everywhere. Well, Nano at Stanford is a network of open access facilities located here at Stanford, and they are tools that researchers can use to create. I call it the makerspace of the nano world. It's open and accessible to all, so it's not just for Stanford students or for Stanford faculty. Literally anyone in the world can come in and get trained and pay to use the facilities and work with our staff to create their new device. And so we have startup companies, we have industry, we have other academic institutions where they don't have the facilities that we have. And this little quick chart gives you an idea. Over here on this side, you'll see companies that you've probably heard of before. And then on the left side, you're going to see startups that you haven't heard of before. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem, and you just never know who you're going to talk to in the lab, which is one of the things I really enjoy about it. Okay, so what is nanotechnology? So nanotechnology is the making, learning, or controlling of useful materials at a really small scale, that 1 to 100 nanometer scale. And this scale is very special, and it allows researchers to be really creative about solutions to everyday problems, from like batteries to fuels to medicines. And just to give you an idea of how small it is, I refer to a meter stick because we're all pretty familiar with a meter stick. And when you think about how many nanometers will fit on this meter stick, so in your mind, you just take a guess right now, and then I will tell you the answer, which is a billion. So a billion nanometers fit in this, roughly this space. So we cannot see them with our eyes, anything at the nanoscale. And in fact, we can't see them with regular light microscopes. We need special microscopes, which is part of what's called characterization, and I'll be talking about a little bit later. All right, so why do we care? Who cares about things being really small? And it is because at this particular scale, materials have unexpected properties. And the common example is gold, because we all know what color is gold. It's gold, okay? That's what we see with our eyes. But we can actually tune gold, depending on its size, to be a different color. So we actually change its optical properties. So these lovely vials here are all different sizes of gold nanoparticles. And depending on the size, it affects the optical property so that you can get gold to be red or gold to be purple. This is nothing new. Actually, artisans were doing this back in 1200 AD. Stained glass windows are actually made of liquid metals that have been formed into glass, and they are actually nanoparticles. Now, these artisans didn't call them that at the time because they didn't have the tools to understand what they were making. They just did a trial and error process. So tools have really allowed science to enter into this nano world. So, well, what's the big deal if I can make gold a different color? And this has applications in biology, in material science, in a lot of different ways. So, nanotechnology is like a tool set. It's not a department. It's not usually a degree, but rather it's a set of skills that you learn that can help you in all of these different areas. So, if you're a computer scientist or a chemist or a biologist or a physicist, it all connects back through nanotechnology. And these are just some basic examples of some things people are working on: cancer treatments, lab on a chip, of course, faster, more efficient, more energy efficient microchips, high performance computers, flexible electronics, basically anything you can think of. Okay. So, what does this have to do with the internship? Well, you would be working in a nanofabrication facility, and the basis material for most of what happens in that facility is silicon. That's why we live in the Silicon Valley. And so silicon is the template or the base that anyone can build whether it be a sensor or an electronic device. And it is actually the foundation of all the electronic devices that we take for granted today, like our phones and our computers and our cameras and our Nests and all of those lovely things. And it's crazy to think that an iPhone that we have in our pocket has about 3 billion transistors. And we sent people into space with a capsule that only had about 10,000 transistors in its computing power. So it's pretty amazing what we've been able to do with shrinking down electronics. So how do we do this? And it's basically an overview of a process called fabrication. And this is a very simplistic view, but it gives you the basic idea of the process where you deposit a material, it's photosensitive, you have some kind of exposure, and then you develop it, and then you might remove some material, you might implant some material, and then you just continue this process over and over and over again to build up your device. And this is essentially what people are doing in the clean room. And we're going to be showing you a clean room in just a second. And this basic process allows researchers to create new sensors, new electronic devices, new batteries, all these different kinds of things. All right. So I keep mentioning the facilities, these things, these tools. Well, what are they? Well, we categorize them by you're either making something, which is fabrication and synthesis, tools like etchers and photolithography, tools that Mary Ann's going to be showing you, as well as characterization, which means basically, how do I analyze or see what I made? And then once you put these two things together, you can actually create some amazing applications. So my time is up. And now I'm going to be handing it over to the other members of our nanoscience team, which we have with us right now, two of our current community college interns, Emma and Mary Ann. So I'll have them introduce themselves, and then Mary Ann's going to give you a quick tour of these facilities. So Emma, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Okay, hi, I'm Emma. I'm currently going to Chabot College, which is in Hayward. I'm an intern at SNF, and I guess I'll tell you a little bit about what I do. So, um, you know, our thing is about benefiting the lab. So we restock a lot to keep the lab safe. And I think it's really important to know that we always want to try to help the lab and benefit the lab as much as we can. So that's my daily thing. So anything that I do when I work with staff, it's should always center around benefiting the lab.
Hi everyone, I'm Marianne. I'm a second year at De Anza Foothill College. I'm a data science and statistics major. And currently, right now, we do a mix of like restocking, and a project I'm working on is monitoring the furnaces. So essentially, like processing the wafers and then collecting data about them. And then a project I just finished was the atomic force microscope, finding out the roughness of atoms. And yeah.
Oh. And Mary Ann, what are you wearing?
I'm wearing a bunny suit. It's what protects everything that we're working on. Yeah.
Great. And where are you at right now?
I'm in the gowning room. This is where we gown up for our bunny suits. This is where we restock a little part of the lab. And yeah. Do you want me to continue into the lab? Okay, cool,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. Why don't you
So
go ahead and walk them inside?
this is what it looks like. These are the wet benches with like acids and HFs. We go down here. These are like etching tools. They're doing a little something right here right now. And then moving on. Over here, more
And
etching
Marianne,
tools. Yes.
she's walking around our big 10,000 square foot lab. So she's got a long way to go
Yeah.
to show you around.
This is another one of our interns. His name is Sean, and this is the furnaces actually that we're monitoring. We put the wafers in right over here. He's actually doing some right now. And then we process them on these like graphical, on these, what is it, GPUs. And yeah, and then after they come out, after like 6 hours or so, we measure them on like another machine. Okay, and then more wet benches. Continuing on, we're going to head inside the lithography room. Oh, okay.
Marianne, you may notice something drastically just changed as Marianne opened the door. And this is
Yeah.
an important thing to understand the working environment. There is a room that is a strange color. And so that's something that you would have to be comfortable with working in under those conditions. What does it sound like where you're at, Marianne?
There's like this muffled voice in the background where all these machines are working. Yeah, and this is like where we put on the photoresist. And since it's yellow light, we don't want to overexpose it by bringing it into white light, which is why everything is like yellow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me.
And right now, we don't expect that you guys are familiar with any of these terms like etch and photoresist and all of these things. This just shows you how far you come in the internship. Emma and Marianne had no experience
Yeah.
with photolithography or fabrication, and now they're like throwing out these words left and right, like it's just part of everyday life because that's the growth that you can see in the internship. So maybe that's something that you can share about kind of what has had you, it's been 20 weeks or
Yeah.
so we're nearing kind of the end of that first section that we ask, the minimum that we ask interns to stay, which is that 20 weeks. And Marianne and Emma have given you some insight into the lab. What are some of the things that you get to do outside of the lab? Fun
Emma,
stuff.
would you like to start? Oh, fun stuff. Okay. It's awesome because you get an ID here and you can access different buildings and study there. So it's like really pretty study places. You also have access to the gym. So I like going bouldering because the climbing wall is free access to us too. And going to the libraries are always like amazing because you're studying in this like huge building with like tall ceilings. Yeah, that's the fun stuff I do outside the lab.
Fun stuff for me is I really like the events. Usually most of the events Stanford has, you could probably go to, or seminars. We have seminars even in our building that you can watch. And then recently we just had an open house, which was super fun. Um, so you get to meet people from industry, you get to talk to other like PhD students presenting posters. And I think all of that really just helps you learn more when you connect to people. So I would say that is probably the fun things that I do outside of the lab.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both for sharing about the inside and the outside of the lab. I think something that Marianne mentioned was the libraries. And one of the things that you get access to with being able to have the Stanford ID is the libraries and all of the papers. So if you've ever been looking for something and you found a paper and you go to click on it and then they want you to pay $50 to read it, Stanford pretty much has access to everything where you don't have to pay and you can actually download those articles and get that information because you are connected to the university. So that's a really nice academic benefit if you're interested in reading scientific literature. you definitely get more access with being a part of the internship. So I'd also like to take this time just to introduce one of our staff members that's here that works closely with interns and has a fun full circle story, Rochelle. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Rochelle and ask her to introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her journey.
Okay, can you guys hear me? I have
Yes.
to log into a different system. Okay,
Yep.
how about now?
We're good.
Okay, sorry, my computer is not doing well with my audio, but as long as you guys can hear me, we're good.
Yep.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Rochelle, and I work as a process operations associate. I was an intern like Marianne and Emma that are wandering around right now. Yeah, so a little bit of what I did as an intern is, I'm sure most of it was covered, but you do get a lot of opportunities in outreach slash just making connections. I made a lot of connections with industry. I've made a lot of connections with, I guess, like startups, like almost kind of anything. You're exposed to almost everything at Stanford, so it's pretty specialized. There's no set in stone route after an internship. It's just that your experience is what you make of it and who you talk to. But do you want me to answer questions, Danielle, or?
Well, I think maybe Rochelle, maybe give some insight into, because you work really closely with the interns in the lab, just sort of like what their first, few weeks is like, when they come and join the team.
Yeah. So we've we've made a structure where the first 2 weeks you will be onboarding. So I kind of lead that with another staffer, Alex, which you'll see maybe not today, but maybe one day. But it's me and Alex, and we basically just go through what it looks like a day-to-day basis, how you restock, why do we restock, and also comfortability with chemicals. So if you're comfortable with chemicals, that's a big one because you are exposed to a lot of acids and bases. And that's kind of what your first 2 weeks looks like. And you also get to connect and collaborate with interns that are already here. So that's like something that's very important to us. We always want to make sure that you guys are connected with our interns here because it's kind of like a little community that we got going. And you guys end up becoming very close because you are with them either every day or every other day. So that's kind of what we base our first 2 weeks on. And then we want to start our 3 to 4 week mark at like maybe introducing some tools. We have a couple of tools that you're supposed to run in your daily routine. So we just like to bring that upon you. But honestly, we've all realized that everything is kind of a pace-to-pace thing. Everyone's different at their own pace. Everyone works at their own pace. We try to work around that, but at least for the first 4 weeks, we do try to keep it pretty tight so we can have everybody on the same schedule and not have anyone fall behind. But we support each other throughout it all. If you don't understand a tool and you need to kind of go over it, we have about 12 interns that can help you do that. So it's not too much of an issue normally, but yeah, we try to keep it pretty sturdy for the first 4 weeks. And then on week 5, you get assigned a tool and a mentor. And basically you get to run monitors and use it every month. And that's how you really get experience in the lab and just learn nanotech. That's your real introduction to nanotechnology, and you'll get really, really comfortable with the tool and eventually do projects at about maybe week 10 to 20, which is really exciting. And we have a lot of posters that our interns just did, and they barely hit their 20-week mark about a week or 2 ago. So a lot has been accomplished. So yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Rochelle. And I think you highlighted two really important things, flexibility and community. So Rochelle mentioned it is what you make of it. So you can come in and do the minimum, which is the 8 hours minimum twice a day or twice a week, sorry. Or you can max out at the 20 hours per week, depending on your school schedule. And the more time you're able to spend in lab, the more you're going to learn. and the more you're going to grow and the more opportunities are going to come your way. So I think that that's where that flexibility is that Rochelle was mentioning. I think also that the secondary point about community, we currently have about 18 interns overall across the different labs, because there are 3 labs. The one you just toured right now is the biggest lab with the most interns. That's SNF. But then we have a smaller clean room that has 3 interns in it, and they're also going to be hiring an intern. And then we have another lab, which is a more chemistry focused lab. And so on the application, it gives you kind of some of the breakdowns and a little bit of that information. But it's all the same. It's all getting lab experience, getting to work with, amazing staff and meet other interns. And I think those are pretty much the basics of it. I know there's some questions in the chat. I did want to put up this slide just to give you kind of the rundown of the very basics that we just talked about. So that's the minimum 8 hours per week over 2 days. So we do require that you have to come in at least 2 days a week for lab. It is in person. There's no virtual, right? It's getting that hands-on experience. I want to highlight the part that you are not doing research. So Emma mentioned at the beginning that whatever you do needs to benefit the lab. So you're not working with, a staff member to work on your specific research project. What it is, the projects that Rochelle was mentioning were projects that have to do with tools and data and creating deliverables that are going to help benefit our lab community. And that's what our interns were, and Marianne was talking about in terms of presenting at the open house. So it's really important to understand that, because it's a little bit different from what you might think of as other internships, where it's very narrow and very, focused on one topic. There is no experience needed, but any lab experience is helpful. So Rochelle mentioned the fact that you're going to handle chemicals, right? And you saw Marianne is in a lab environment. So even if you just took high school chemistry, right, that can be helpful. It's just knowing that you're not afraid of things like chemicals as long as you're given proper training. So we kept mentioning these tools. We don't just throw you at a tool. You have to go through a series of trainings to get qualified to be able to use the tool. And as Rochelle mentioned, there's a big community to support you in that journey. If you are having a good time and you're contributing to the lab, that 20-week mark, which is the minimum requirement, can be extended. Most of our interns stay about 1.5 years. That's been the average. So it is something that you can continue to grow in if it makes sense for your school schedule and for what you're able to contribute to the lab. I also want to mention questions that I often get an email, which is, how can I help get selected, and what's the rate, and all of those questions. And we don't like to talk about acceptance rates. Obviously, we get more applications than we have spots. We're going to be hiring for 6 spots in this particular round. But I can say that kind of the 2 things that are really most important is to make clear to us in your answers on the application, and maybe even a little bit in your cover letter, if it makes sense, for how are you going to personally benefit from this type of experience, from this Nano Lab experience? How is it going to be valuable to you in your educational journey? And then what do you bring to the table, right? What do you bring to us in terms of skills or traits? We do not expect you to have lab experience, right? We do not expect you to know what nanofabrication is. But what do you personally have that's going to help you grow and contribute in the way that you've heard Emma and Marianne and Rochelle talk about? Those are the things that we're looking for. So hopefully that answered some of the questions that were in the chat that I saw, but we'll go ahead and open it up. Emma, were there any questions that I didn't get that were in the chat that come to mind?
Yes, there is one question asking, is it possible to work 1 day a week for 8 hours for students with a long commute?
No, it is a 2-day minimum. You have to come in twice. Anything else? And at this point, you're welcome to raise your hand and you can unmute and speak if you don't feel like using the chat. I do see a question about internship for pre-med students. Again, I think it would go back to the question that I threw out to you, which is how is this going to benefit you? It's your job to convince us that your goals are aligned with what you would get out of this experience. So if you're a pre-med student looking for, understanding what a hospital environment is, this isn't the internship for you, right? But if you're a pre-med student interested in medical research, then maybe that's something that you can connect to it. And then there was a question I saw about, do you get to decide what lab to work in? And we do ask you like a preference, but ultimately it is up to where we think you're going to be a best fit. So we usually hire twice a year so that an application would probably open up again like around March, and then that would run the 20 weeks, which would go through summer. But it's always dependent upon funding and if we have interns leave, because we have a maximum capacity of like 25. So if everyone's staying and then we don't, so we can't guarantee that it's going to open in March. But in the past,
I
that's
see.
kind of been the pattern. About questions about international students and undocumented students. And you have to be able to complete an I-9 form, which is where you have to provide a certain amount of documentation. If you have specific questions about that, international students can apply as long as they can meet that documentation requirement for the I-9. And if you want to know what that is, you can send me an email and I can send you the link. Okay. And the labs that we have are 2 clean rooms, one very large, one smaller. And then we also have what's called ICPMS, which doesn't mean anything to you, except that it's a lot of chemistry. And that's the 3rd lab, which is the smallest lab where there's just one intern. Okay. So we've got the last minute. Any other questions? And I think there was a question if you're planning to transfer from community college in 2025. Again, we are asking for that minimum 20-week commitment. So as long as you can commit to at least that, then you're welcome to apply. And you can see if you just use the email on the website, the NNCI Access, it'll find its way to me. Okay. So thank you all for joining. We appreciate it. And thank you to interns and Rochelle. And we look forward to your application. Take care.